Right, there we go. Right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very merry DevOps, our Welsh Azure user group Christmas special. Thanks to everybody for joining. Really appreciated. We've got a bit of a bumper evening for you tonight. I think it probably goes without saying, and it seems to have just got better and better over the last couple of days. So by way of a quick agenda, I'm going to try and keep this bit really as short as possible because I know we want to hear as much as we can from Abel and April. So really just a quick agenda then. So we'll run through a few sort of precursory housekeeping bits and pieces. We got Abel joining us to talk about some real world DevOps and give us some demos and talks around that at around about 6:45. Around about 7:30 then we're going to jump over to April. She's going to be talking to us around A/B deployments using Azure DevOps and looking at GitHub Actions. So really, I can't thank the guys enough for agreeing to come and join us at the Welsh Azure user group and give these talks. I'm really looking forward to them personally, and I'm sure everybody that's joining is equally as looking forward. We got some great prizes. Hopefully we'll get the quiz in around about 8:15, give or take 10 minutes or so. It depends, see how we get going. And as always, we'll aim for about 8:30 to close out. Okay, housekeeping. As always, everyone, please be courteous to each other. You're all on mute at the moment. You've all got control of your own mute. So just stay on mute unless one of the speakers invites you to come off mute and talk. Remember, there's no silly questions here. Anything that you want to ask, pop it in the chat. We've got a few IT pros on the channel. I'm sure they can all help. And if there is other questions, we'll aim to see if we can get a little bit of time at the end of Abel and April's talk just to see if they can answer them quickly for us. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We're going a little bit different for this user group. What we want you to do is get tweeting and tagging your favorite sort of festive selfies. So get those pictures on the go, get onto Twitter throughout the duration of these sessions tonight. Tag us Welsh Azure and hashtag WAUG. I'll tell you why we're doing that in a second. And don't forget, if you haven't already got it installed, get the Kahoot app. Get the Kahoot app on your phone because we will be having a quiz. Okay, as always, just a quick hello from us all. We're all on the call. We're all contactable. There's Richard Griff. I don't know if you want to say hello. It's going to be one of those things. You're still on mute.
Hello. Sorry. Yeah.
Hello.
So quickly. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Griff.
There we are. We got a Bull.
Hi everyone. I'm a Bull.
There we are. And we got George.
Hi everyone. I'm George.
There we are. And then we're hugely supported by Microsoft representatives. So we got Anna, who you can see with the festive hat.
Evening all. Thanks for joining.
We got Matt.
Hi everyone.
And Ahmed. I don't know if Ahmed's on, is he? I'm not sure if he's joining us a little bit later. Ahmed, you there? No, he's not. He's not on. But yeah, if there's any questions you want to talk, you've got some comments and feedback, anything like that, reach out to any of us, tweet us, join the LinkedIn group, and we'll be as responsive as we like. Or if you've got any suggestions for any future talks, great, let us know. Moving on. A big thank you to our sponsors of our user group. So a big shout out to Des and Servant, been a huge support to us for the last few months since becoming our user group sponsor. As you can see, Servant supports a few of the other local user groups. So we've got the Northern Azure user group and the Glasgow Azure. And hey, while we're in this virtual user group thing, I would highly recommend that you go and hit those guys up and go and watch some of their sessions because they've got equally as superb speakers on those. So really join in the community, go and give those guys a bit of support. But thank you to Servants for sponsoring us. Equally, Admiral, another one of our main sponsors, a South Wales HQ'd company. Huge support from Admiral. Thanks, guys. Thanks to all our sponsors. Okay, one quick thing then before we break into something else. Wanted to bring to your attention. So for those of you that are quite avid on Twitter or in the community, we got this global community event going on at the moment. So it's the Festive Tech Calendar, and it's really what it's about is essentially there's over 90 contributors from around the world have all put content, blogs, videos, something technical, well, and non-technical actually. They've gone all out for really putting content available for every day in December, and it's called the Festive Tech Calendar. They cover a wide range of technology, and like I say, there's some fun quizzes, ask me anythings, there's all sorts. I believe there's around 240 hours of video content that's been recorded for this event, and it will be released, like I say, every day in December. Everybody that put in from the community for a session has been accepted, so nobody has been left out, and they're able to give a talk or something. And it's been really impressive, actually, for a community organised event. MS Learn TV has been broadcasting. We've had the Microsoft Dev channels all broadcasting the events. And I believe the opening keynote of this on the 1st December has got, to this point, around about 230,000 views, which is massively impressive. So just giving a shout out to all the organisers of the Festive Tech Calendar. One I know is Greg Asuti. He'll maybe join us in a little bit. Greg, are you not on yet? No? There we are. But Greg has been a main part of this, and there's a huge team behind Gregor as well sorting this out. So give this a look. There's a website and the YouTube link for the content. Obviously, if you just go to festivetechcalendar.com, you're going to get that information. And just one quick final thought. There's another website, cloudfamily.info. It's really a community website full of technical community members. There's lists of blogs, there's lists of technical how-tos, YouTube videos. It's really a central repository of a cloud family. So if you do a quick search across Twitter for #cloudfamily, you'll see tweets from the likes of myself and other people in the community doing some brilliant stuff, to be honest. So yeah, just wanted to call that out. And on that note, Anna, can I hand over to you and talk about the next big announcement?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. And just to second everything what John said, thanks to our guest speakers this evening. Really looking forward to listening to you guys, and thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. And John, I just got to say again, your hat is just brilliant. It's really bringing joy to me tonight. So yeah, thank you. Listen, everyone, thanks for joining. I'm so happy to say that we as the Microsoft, is someone, sorry, I think somebody's come off mute there. Yeah, really happy to say that we've been selected to be part of the Microsoft Skills Challenge. So there's only a small number of user groups that have been selected. So we do really feel lucky to bring this to everyone on the call today. So the Microsoft Cloud Skills Challenge is a challenge all focused on learning. There's a variety of modules that you can complete, and you'll get points for each module you complete. So essentially, the more modules you complete, the more points you get. You need to complete 5 modules or more to be entered into the prize draw. And there's some absolutely amazing prizes to be won that I'll show you. And the prize draw will take place after the completion date, which finishes on Monday, the 21st of September. And we as Microsoft will ship the prizes out to you in the post. So if you enter this competition, the first prize is fantastic. You will win. You have the opportunity to win a Surface Go 2 with the Surface keyboard and a bitbox. That's absolutely awesome. I've actually seen these, are awesome. Second prize, you'll get some Surface headphones and a bitbox. And then the third prize is a bitbox. So there's, these prizes that are up for grabs. So please take part in the competition. There's the opportunity to win all these, but wait, there's more. You also have the opportunity to win a Microsoft exam voucher. If you complete all 5 of the modules for the skills challenge, there's actually 10 vouchers up for grabs. So please reach out to myself at the end of the skills challenge. I can validate with the skills team that you've completed the 5 challenges, and we'll ship a voucher out to you. Please note that the exam needs to be sat by the 31st of May next year, but the exams are worth a few £100, so absolutely take part for this opportunity. So I know you're all dying to know, how do you take part? Give me the information. The URL is on the screen now. I'll paste it into the chat channel, and we'll also share it on our social media platforms. So if you have a Microsoft Learn account, you can access the skills challenge. Your account can be related to your organization, or you can have a personal account and you can log into the skills challenge. So the terms and conditions are all there ready to be shared. And like I said, I'll drop this in the chat channel in a few minutes. So we can say that the Cloud Skill Challenge is officially open for 10 days. You have until midnight on the 21st of December. Bear in mind, the leaders of the Welsh user group, we're taking part in the competition. So you've got some competition here. But yeah, please enter. Good luck, everyone, and stay tuned for the winners on the 21st. So I'll hand back to you now, John. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thanks very much, Anna. I mean, I was a bit gobsmacked when we got chosen for that. I think I'm sure you'll agree that's pretty awesome for a bit of well, at the end of the day, you're going to be learning. So I think it's the open source and Linux path, I think, isn't it, Anna? I think from memory. So some really good content on there. So yeah, okay. So I told you earlier to start tweeting your festive selfies. I'm not sitting on this channel with a Rudolph hat on for my own benefit. It's really just a kind of let's get a bit of festivities up and running. We've got two £50 Amazon vouchers. Yeah, I feel like Santa tonight, you know, with all these prizes, but two £50 Amazon vouchers up for grabs. What we decided to do is if you can tweet and tag us in your best festive selfie, what we'll do, we'll have a little bit of an internal competition tomorrow and we'll pick what we think is the best selfie and we'll contact you and you will be awarded a £50 Amazon voucher. The other voucher prize will be for the winner of our Kahoot quiz later this evening. So I'm sure you'll agree we've covered an incredible amount of things and the evening hasn't even yet got started. So on that note, I think it's probably fair to say, let's get this party started. So Abel, if you are there, are you happy to share your screen?
Absolutely. I am so excited to be here. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. And now I got to pick the right monitor. All right, there we go. Oh, let me move this out of the way. All right, now we're ready. So I'm super excited to be here to talk to you guys about real-world DevOps. But before we begin, I wanted to share with you guys a real-world DevOps disaster story. So this morning, I kind of went and checked out my demos to see if everything's working. And this is what I saw for my demo, which doesn't look great, right? That's not right. All right, so my app is hosted up in Azure. So let's go ahead and jump in Azure and take a look. And yeah, this is my subscription. So apparently some idiot has gone in here and deleted everything from my subscription. And yeah, the idiot was me. I was cleaning out my subscriptions and I have like 15 of them. And I think I cleaned out the wrong one. So yeah, that's kind of a disaster, right? But in theory, I should be okay. Because when I built out my pipelines, I used DevOps best practices, including things like infrastructure as code. So the theory is I should be able to kick off my build and release pipeline. And what that will do is it's going to build my application for me. It's going to provision everything that I need. And the app is kind of massive. So this will be interesting to see if this works or not. But it should do absolutely everything for me. So by the time I'm done talking, hopefully my demo will be up and working. So I'll go ahead and click on this so we can kind of see and check on it live throughout the talk to see if things are working or not. All right, back to the talk, because what can possibly go wrong? For those that don't know me, my name is Abel. I'm a principal cloud advocate and also the DevOps lead here at Microsoft. And I've been writing code for what seems like forever, over 20 years now, which I hate saying out loud because that just shows how freaking old I am. I don't feel like I should be writing code for over 20 years now, but I have. So what can I do? But that's what I do. I eat, drink, live writing code, and it makes me crazy, crazy happy, right? That's what makes me happy is slinging code. I'm super lucky because I do lead a team of, it says 5 here, but there's actually more people now. I lead a team of about 7 people now, and our sole charter is to help everybody get into Azure using DevOps best practices. Now notice, I didn't say you had to use Microsoft tooling, right? I didn't say you had to use GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps Services or anything like that, because ultimately, Azure is an open platform. So what that means is you can use any tooling that you want to get into Azure. And my team, we are here to help. The only thing that we care about is that you use DevOps best practices. So we are definitely a resource. Please do use us. $1 million question, how do you get a hold of us, right? Don't email me, because if you do, I may not see that email for weeks. I'm so behind on my emails. However, I am on Twitter all the freaking time. So if you tweet at me and if you hashtag it LOECDA, that will literally light up a team room for us. We will see it. We will answer your questions. And if I can't answer your questions, I will find the people at Microsoft that can. So again, we are a resource. You have DevOps questions, please do use us. All right, so before I dive in and talk about DevOps, we should probably level set and say what DevOps really is. Because even though we all do DevOps and we all talk about DevOps, if I pick 10 of y'all and ask you what is DevOps, I'm probably going to get 20 different answers. So just to kind of level set and so we have a common ground, let me give you Microsoft's definition. So for us at Microsoft, DevOps is something very, very specific. DevOps is a union of people, process, and products to enable the continuous delivery of value for our end users, right? So the key here is we need to continuously deliver value. Values is what's super, super important. Notice I didn't say continuously deliver code, right? Because what will that give us? Piles and piles of code sitting on a source control server somewhere. Really, who cares? It's not doing anybody any good. And notice I didn't even say continuously deliver features, because I could be delivering feature after feature, sprint after sprint. But again, if this is not what my end users need or want, why am I wasting time, right? What is important is we need to continuously deliver value. So of course, the million-dollar question is why? Why do I need to continuously deliver value? The simple truth is the speed of business today is so crazy fast. The only way engineering teams can keep up and innovate fast enough is if they adopt DevOps best practices. I say this in all of my talks. If you have not adopted DevOps best practices, guess what? Your competitors, they either have or they will. And once they do, they will out-innovate you, and then you will become obsolete. And none of us wants to be obsolete, right? So this is why DevOps is so important. Now, I've been talking about DevOps for, it seems like forever now, but probably the last 5 years, 7 years, something like that. And when I first started talking, I thought this was true, right? I didn't really know, but in my gut, I felt that this was true. I believed it was true. But now in 2020, we've been DevOpsing long enough. We know for a fact. We have empirical numbers that show beyond a shadow of a doubt. Teams that adopt DevOps best practices absolutely out-innovate teams that don't. Not just by a little bit, but by a lot, right? So this right here is exactly why DevOps is so important. However, it's not easy to do right. You have to address all three pillars: the people, the process, and the products. The people, this is a cultural change that has to take place. Basically, it needs to start from the very, very top all the way down to the very bottom of your organization. Everybody needs to be hyper-aligned and hyper-focused on continuously delivering value, whatever that means, whatever that takes, right? So this is a cultural change that needs to occur. This is the most important pillar of all, right? Because I could have the right culture, but the wrong process and the wrong tooling, I can still be successful. But I could have the best process and the most expensive tooling in the world, but if I have the wrong culture, I will not succeed, right? That's how important this pillar is. I can spend an hour just talking about the importance of culture in a DevOps world, but that's not what this talk is about, right? But so yeah, everybody just needs to be hyper-focused on continuously delivering value. Next, we need a process. This is probably the easiest pillar of all, because we know the type of processes that work. Again, 2020, we've been doing this a really long time. So what works? Agile processes work fantastic, right? It will let you iterate fast enough, yet still deliver high enough quality of code. So agile processes, I'm talking about agile with a capital A, Kanban, Scrum, so on and so forth, right? There's many different flavors and they all work very well. And finally, we do need products and tooling that can help enable all of this, to give us the automation that we need, to help us track the work that we need to do. So between all three of these pillars, people, most important and hardest to change, but you do need to address all three of these. So right about this time, this is usually when I give my demo, right? And my demos are, I'm sorry, I gotta say it. My demos are beautiful. They're freaking awesome. And yes, I sound like a certain American president right now, but my demos rock, right? They're fancy, they're rainbows and unicorns. I make a change, things start happening, builds kick off, automated UI test runs, things are happening all over the screen. And before you know it, within a couple of minutes, the changes that I just typed in shows up in my production environment, and I raise my hand up and I say, yay, look how awesome everything is, right? That's my usual demos. However, that's not very real world like, right? Because DevOps in the real world, we all do DevOps, right? What's DevOps in the real world like? It's usually more like this. It can turn into a dumpster fire really, really quickly. So what I wanted to do was to show you all a real world example and how to solve real world problems with DevOps. So what I wanted to do was to use a real world application. So the type of application I'm going to build, what about we'll do a modern microservice-based application, right? So what this is going to have is it's going to have a lot of moving pieces. First, there's going to be a web front end that's going to be written in ASP.NET. And I don't mean ASP.NET Core, I mean old school ASP.NET has to run on IIS in some Windows server somewhere, right? Who does this type of stuff? Well, there are a lot of enterprises out there that have legacy apps, like giant mono applications that you need to slowly tease apart, right? So this is an example of one of those. So this has an ASP.NET old school web front end. It also has a SQL Server in the back end, and this is just a SQL Server database. But this application has been teased apart, right? Granted, it used to be one big giant mono app, but we've teased it apart into microservices. So it does also have a REST API. It's written in Node, and it's going to be hosted in a Kubernetes cluster. There's also a services layer. This is written in .NET Core. I'm going to containerize this as well. I don't need all the fancy Kubernetes stuff, so this can just run in a Docker container. And I also have mobile apps for this as well, right? So this is a modern type of application. However, because this is a modern application, I start running into real world problems as well. And the first thing that I ran into is this application is not ready for real microservice deployments. What do I mean about that? All right, so one of the biggest benefits of microservices, like a microservice architecture, is now if I make changes to my application, I don't need to deploy absolutely everything, right? All I need to do is build, test, and deploy the microservice that change. So this could be so much easier. So instead of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of lines of code to ship, maybe, well, now my microservice is much smaller, it's much easier to test, and it's much easier to deploy. Well, I'm like, fantastic. I can build out 5 tiny little pipelines. This is going to be a really cool demo, right? Yeah, my 5 pipelines worked 2 times, and then things started breaking, right? Because I forgot that my microservices still have dependencies on each other, right? So if microservice A depends on microservice B, what that means now is the order that I deploy my microservices start to matter. Because if I do it in the wrong order, things can break, I'm gonna have downtime. And for whatever reason, I don't wanna have any downtime for this particular application. Well, it's not for any reason. There are applications in our world where we cannot have downtime, right? All right, so how do I fix this? The more I looked at it, the worse this problem became. Because first I was like, okay, maybe I can just keep track of the dependency, build out a dependency tree, maybe even have a tool, and then the order that I deploy it can depend on the dependency tree. I can build some smarts into my pipeline. It might get complex, but I can do this, right? But then I realized that for me, microservice A depended on microservice B, which depended on microservice C, that depended on microservice A. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble now, because now I have a circular dependency. And what that ultimately means is no matter how I try to deploy this, I'm going to have downtime. So how do I approach this? Well, I know how to approach this. I mean, ultimately, what I need to do is I need to tease apart my microservices even more, right? A true microservice architecture means my microservices do not have dependencies on each other. So I need to tease my microservices apart even more. One way that I can do that is I can build a really smart microservice architecture where my microservices will actually reach out and ask each other, hey, what version are you at? And my other microservices can say, hey, I'm on version 3. And I can be like, oh, I wish you were on 4, but you're on 3 because of that. Let me turn off my feature flags for 4 and go and turn on my feature flags for number 3. Now we can start communicating. I might lose some features, but my app won't go down and things can still continue until everybody gets caught up, right? So I wish I came up with this brilliant idea. I didn't. This is literally how we handle a lot of the microservices that we have at Microsoft. So again, wish I came up with it. I wish I was that brilliant, but people far smarter than me came up with it. But I know how to code it, but it's extra code, right? But it's okay, so I can do that. But what do I do right now today? Oh, we'll have to figure that out, right? The other thing that I have right now is my infrastructure is incredibly painful to spin up. Because if you think about it, because I'm using microservices, there's a lot of infrastructure that I need to spin up. I've got to spin up an ASP.NET web front end. I've got to spin up a Kubernetes cluster. I've got to spin up Azure Storage. I've got to spin up Azure Front Door, which is a load balancer. I've got to spin up Azure Functions. I've got to spin up all sorts of things. And every time I do that, it takes me about an hour to provision everything and to configure everything. It is painful, which means I really don't want to provision and configure a whole lot, right? But sometimes I need to. So there's got to be a way to fix that. I have another problem. Microservices, they're very difficult for me to join on the back end where they call each other because everything on the back end, I start running into course issues, right? Cross-domain issues. So how do I solve that? I can add extra code to solve it. But again, what do I do right now when my code, when I don't have the time to add the extra code? Got to figure that out. Database DevOps. I have a relational database, right? How do I handle that in a DevOps world? Same with my mobile app. Same with quality and security. Great. We have these beautiful pipelines where I can touch my code, it'll build, test, deploy, all the way out to production with no manual intervention, right? So does that mean I'm just pushing bugs into production at a crazy rate? Like, how do I maintain quality in the DevOps world? And same with security. How do I maintain security? And then finally, because I'm trying to model this after the real world, I have to think about things like, how do I set up DNS and HTTPS as well? Because that potentially can change every single time I deploy. It may or may not, right? But I do need to think about that. So, how do I fix all of this? And the answer is, dun, 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 what I call DevOps Nirvana. Literally, I can build a pipeline that does everything that I need, that will solve all of my real world problems, where I no longer worry about deployment or even disasters, like somebody going in and deleting every single resource. I can just kick off my pipeline and everything will be fixed, right? That's the power of DevOps. Our DevOps pipelines are way more powerful than any of us imagines, right? So how powerful can they be? Your imagination is the limit. So let me show you what I did. And so yes, I happen to be using Azure DevOps Services to run my pipelines, but nothing that I'm doing is, sacred to Azure DevOps Services. Again, you can literally use any type of tooling. So what I'm trying to show here is concepts. Tooling I'm using, Azure DevOps Services. What I want you guys to get out of this is not about Azure DevOps Services, although if you want to use it, I'm always cool with that. Or if you want to use GitHub Actions, I'm super cool with that. But what I'm trying to show here is DevOps best practices that you can apply to literally any tooling. All right, let's go see how to build out this pipeline. All right, so let's jump back to our demo, and it looks like things are turning green, which is awesome. So far, so good. So the first thing that we need to do is basically look at the build pipeline, because very, very unfortunately, because I have not teased out my microservices to the point where they don't have dependencies, right now, today, I have to treat everything like one big giant mono application. Why? Because I haven't teased things apart enough. So my rule of thumb is that my deployment scope is going to be the scope of my dependencies. So the scope of my dependencies determines the scope of my release. Right now, my dependencies, even though I have microservice architecture, this is still one big giant mono architecture because I still have some dependencies. So until I tease that apart, I have to treat everything like just one gigantic mono app. So because of that, everything starts with my build. And if you look at my build, in parallel, I build 4 things, right? What am I building? First, I use a Windows agent to build my web front end. And the first thing I do, I restore my packages from NuGet, and then I scan my source code using White Source Bolt. What is White Source Bolt? That's actually a security tool that scans my repo and checks to see what open source projects I'm using. And if I'm not using the latest and greatest version of that open source library, it will start showing me all the potential security holes that I have because of it. And if it's bad enough, it'll flat out tell me, no, I'm going to fail this build and you need to update because there's too big of a security hole, right? So it's a security tool. What I'm trying to show here is how do we maintain security in a DevOps world? We shift left, right? We no longer have time to do full end-to-end a security audit at the end of our development cycle. So that's how we used to do things. We'd write our code, and at the end, we'd throw our code over to a security auditing team. They would audit our code. They'd spend a couple months doing that, and they would find all the problems, and we'd have to go fix them. We don't have time to do that anymore. Nobody has the time. So what we have to do is shift left. We have to build security into our app as we're writing it, as opposed to trying to tack on security at the end. And the way that we can do that is through our pull request and having people review each pull request, and by adding security tools, scanning tools, things like that into our pipeline. So this is just one, right? If I jump into the library marketplace and I type in security, you can see that there are extensions for pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of security tools that you can slip in. Security tools that do all sorts of things. We even have security tools that will automatically try to hack your application or do SQL injections and fuzzers and this, that, and the next, right? There's all sorts of things that we can do to add into our pipeline to maintain security in a DevOps world. All right, some other things that I'm doing. I build my solution, run my unit test. I want to point this out. I know running unit tests is not a big deal, but unit tests are a very, very big deal. How do you maintain quality in a DevOps world? Again, the way that we used to do it is we try to bolt it on at the end. We'd write our code, throw it over to QA. QA would then try to find our bugs. End-to-end functional testing could take weeks, months. For something as big as Windows, it could take over a year to do full end-to-end functional testing. Not proud of that, but that's the truth. Nobody has the time to do that as well. So how do you maintain security? Again, you build it in, or maintain quality, you build it in as you're writing your application with things like automated UI tests, automated unit tests, things like that. So just to give you some perspective, unit tests are so freaking important. At Microsoft, how do we maintain quality for, let's say, Azure DevOps services? We happen to use unit testing. So this is our quality dashboard. But what I wanted to show you was our pull requests. So every developer check-in has to go through a pull request where we review each other's code. But for a pull request to go through, the first thing that it needs to do is it needs to build. And after it builds, it needs to run and go through all of our tests, right? So let me go ahead and pick a pull request that I've gone through. So again, every single pull request that has to happen, it needs to pass our build, and it needs to pass all of our L0 and our L1 tests, which are our unit tests, right? So every single pull request today has to go through over 27,861 unit tests. And you know what? We do all of this in less than 8 minutes, 5 minutes, 4 seconds. Right. So I don't want to hear about, oh, it's too slow or it can't be done. It absolutely can be done. How do we at Microsoft maintain quality in a DevOps world? By doing this. Every check-in has to pass over 27,000 unit tests. So unit tests are vital in this world. All right, let's jump back to our pipeline. What else am I doing? Then I package everything up so it's ready to be deployed. Remember, I have an iOS app as well, so I use a Mac to build my application. My services, I use a Linux machine to build my .NET Core, and then this is going to run in a Docker container. So I create a Docker container. and I push that to a container registry. Next, I have my API layer, and remember, this is written in Node, and I want this to run in a Kubernetes cluster. So when I build this application, I build it in my container, and I turn that into a Helm package because that's the easiest way for me to manage my deploying into Kubernetes. So that's what I do. And if everything is successful and it works, it kicks off my release pipeline. So here is my release pipeline. Looks kind of crazy, right? It's doing a lot of things. The very first thing that it does is it deploys, it provisions in Azure for me and deploys a set of tools that I need to use to help me deploy the rest of my application. So what is it doing literally, right? Because remember, we have a completely empty subscription. There's nothing in there. So the first thing that I do is I decrypt all my secrets in Key Vault. Why do I use Key Vault? Because Key Vault is freaking amazing, right? It is a centralized location where I can store all of my secrets. It's easy to recycle them, to change them out. There's so many benefits to Key Vault. I'm about to drop a blog post on why Key Vault is so amazing, but it freaking rocks. So I store all of my secrets inside of Key Vault. Next, I call a shell script. This is a PowerShell script. Why PowerShell? This can literally be anything. It doesn't have to be PowerShell. It could be Bash. It could be whatever. But what this is I'm literally using the Azure CLI to provision for me everything that I need. So I'm using the concept of infrastructure as code to provision and configure the infrastructure that I need in the cloud. And once that's done, I go ahead and deploy my application in, which are my tools. So now I provision an Azure function, I provision Azure storage, I deploy my application. So these are my tools in here that I use throughout my pipeline. And we'll touch on what these tools are doing. But when that's done, then in parallel, I go ahead and provision all the infrastructure that I need and then deploy the pieces into the infrastructure as well. So let's look at the web first because that's easiest to understand, right? So the first thing that I do, I get my secrets from Key Vault. I call a script that provisions the infrastructure that I need for my web front end. And when that's done, I go ahead and deploy my web front end into the infrastructure that I just provisioned. Again, I'm using infrastructure as code, right? So infrastructure as code, if I'm talking about Azure, I'm talking about either ARM templates, maybe Terraform, Pulmonary, things like that, right? In my case, I was lazy, so I just used the Azure CLI. Why the Azure CLI? Because it's really easy to use. And the Azure CLI is mostly idempotent, right? So the concept of idempotent is I can run it multiple times, but if it's already done it once, then it'll just not error out, but it'll just do a no-op, right? So it won't produce an error if your settings have already been set or your infrastructure has already been provisioned. It just doesn't do anything, right? So that's a really important concept for infrastructure as code. But again, the type of infrastructure as code that I'm using is not what's important. I literally could have done this with an ARM template, with Terraform, or with Bicep or whatever, right? The concept that I'm trying to portray here is use infrastructure as code. It is a vital portion inside of DevOps. All right, so that's what I'm doing. To give you an idea what this infrastructure as code is doing, I'm using, remember, the Azure CLI, right? So I wrap that in a PowerShell script. It could be a Bash script, it could be whatever. I chose PowerShell because I know PowerShell really well. I know Bash kind of well, and I would have to do a lot less Googling with PowerShell. That's why I use PowerShell. But it can literally be whatever scripting language you want to use, or you can use an ARM template or Terraform or so on and so forth. My case, I used a PowerShell script, so I pass in the parameters that I need, and literally using the Azure CLI, I start provisioning and configuring what I need. I log in using a service principal, and then I go ahead and create my resource group, then I create my web app service plan, then I configure it, so on and so forth, right? So basically, that's it. Nothing magic there. All right, let's jump back to our pipeline, because what else am I doing? In parallel, let's take a look at my data layer. Again, I'm doing the same thing, getting my secrets from Key Vault, provisioning my database by using the Azure CLI, by passing it to a Bash script. And once that's done, I can do database DevOps with DevOps tooling, right? So in my case, I'm using SQL Server data tools, where it will literally do a schema compare based on what the schema that I've checked into my source control versus what is out in production or in whatever environment I'm deploying to. And it will automatically create for me the scripts that will change the schema so that it matches whatever's in source control. Right? And there's a couple different ways that you can do this. But again, my point is we don't need to have manual person like a DBA looking at creating these scripts for us, doing whatever. We have tooling now where we can do database DevOps. That's what I'm trying to show, right? All right, I'm doing one extra thing as well. Let me bring up my script because I think this is actually kind of cool. Let me show you. For my database, again, same thing, right? I pass in a bunch of parameters. I log in using the Azure CLI. I provision and configure SQL Server as well. But the other thing that I'm doing is, since I'm using Azure SQL, it automatically takes backups for me, and it's storing it in a whole nother subscription. So what that means is if I am going out there and re-provisioning a SQL Server database, what that tells me is something really bad has happened. So the next thing that I do is, if I'm doing that, let's go ahead and download the backup that I have that automatically gets created. And from there, let me restore my database from the backup. So now I have disaster recovery built directly into my pipeline as well. So not only does my pipeline re-provision everything for me, it will literally do disaster recovery, recover my data for me as well. So it's a very, very cool thing that I'm doing within this pipeline. All right, let's jump back to the pipeline. We'll take this a little bit faster now because a lot of this is just rinse and repeat. For my mobile, I decrypt my secrets from Key Vault. I update my backend services. This is some other stuff that I do. And I deploy to my beta environment or my beta testers by using App Center. For my API layer, what am I doing there? Remember, this is to a Kubernetes cluster, right? I decrypt my secrets from Key Vault. I actually end up using an ARM template to provision and configure my Kubernetes cluster. Why am I using an ARM template here? Because I kind of wanted to show you guys that the type of infrastructure as code that I'm using is way less important than the concept of use infrastructure as code, right? Whichever one that does whatever you need for it. So in this case, I'm using an ARM template, and then I use Helm to deploy my services layer into the Kubernetes cluster. What else am I doing? Oops, I just pressed the wrong button. Hold on. The only other thing that I'm doing here is I also set up DNS. So my DNS is saved up in Cloudflare. Cloudflare has a full set of REST APIs that lets me configure and do whatever I need to. So again, I can grab my secrets from Key Vault, and then I provision DNS by sending it to this PowerShell script, right? So in the PowerShell script, what am I doing? I'm just calling the REST APIs for Cloudflare to change my DNS settings so it matches everything that I need, right? So again, this is doing real things. All right, so once all of that is done, right, because this is all in parallel, now, finally, I'm able to provision Front Door. What is Front Door? Front Door is like an Uber load balancer that balances across the entire world. It's super, super powerful. I can use it for all sorts of things that I'm not using it. But right now, what I really love about it is basically you can mask all of your backend APIs so it looks like it's coming in through the same URL. So what that does is just by throwing Front Door in front of everything, it magically fixes my CORS issue. Hooray for that. However, Front Door also has some weird issues once I started trying to provision it. It turns out you cannot provision an instance of Front Door until the DNS settings that you want to use has propagated down all the way to the local machine. Why do we have that? I have no idea why, but we do, right? These are some of just the weird things that happens when we work in the real world. So what did I do? I created a post-deployment gate. An automated post-deployment gate. Actually, let's go to the live one because we can actually see what it did live. So basically what I did was one of the tools that I created was let's go ahead and check and see if the DNS setting has propagated all the way down locally. So inside of Azure DevOps Services in the pipeline, they have automated approval gates. Of course, we all know about manual approval gates where you go in there and say, yes, I approve before it goes on to the next stage. We also have automated approval gates, which uses code to help you determine if you should go on to the next stage or not. So this one, literally, when you create that, you can set up the polling frequency and the timeout. So I said every 5 minutes, let's go and check and see, has the DNS settings propagated down locally? And if it hasn't, let's wait 5 minutes and then try again. If it does, turn green and go on to the next step. So this way, we don't provision front door until those DNS settings that I need has propagated down locally. And when I go ahead and provision front door, nothing magical here, I do the same thing, right? Get my secrets from Key Vault, provision front door by using the Azure CLI wrapped in a PowerShell script. I do have an add HTTPS script as well. What is this doing? I have to wait until everything is provisioned before I can set up my HTTP, upload my certificates and things like that. Luckily in Azure, I can do all of that using the Azure CLI. So again, this is just a PowerShell script that calls the Azure CLI to add HTTPS to my application. So once I do that, I branch out and in parallel do two things. First, I run a full set of automated UI tests against my web front end. And what is this right here? This is actually a security task. And this security task, it looks at the resource group that I've provisioned, and it looks and compares it to my security policy that I have. So if I break any of my security policies in my resource group, bam, immediately this will stop my release, flag it as a security thing. Why am I doing this here? Because at this point in time, this is when all of my resource group, all of my environment has been provisioned in Azure. So what I'm trying to show here is, guess what? You can add your security tasks in here. If this was truly a real world thing, I might throw in some fuzzers here to try to hack my applications, SQL injection things as well, right? Those type of security tasks. So the point is, guess what? You can add security into your pipeline. In parallel, I'm also doing the same thing for my mobile app. So I'm using App Center again to run all of my automated UI tests. And once it's done, it goes into my beta done environment where I'm not doing anything, but I have a manual approver, because by here, what this means is I've now deployed everything. I've run all of my tests. I think it looks good, but I need someone to look at it to tell me, does it look good? So let's take a look and see. It looks like we have deployed and it's waiting for a manual approver, right? All right, let's see if it's worked. If I go into Azure and I refresh, it looks like I created a brand new resource group. And if I drill into the resource group, you can see it's provisioned all sorts of stuff, including my Kubernetes cluster, including my database, my web front end, storage, so on and so forth, right? It's provisioned everything that I need. But the proof is in the pudding. Let's refresh and see if the app really provisioned correctly and deployed. And bam, there you go. It looks like it worked. Now remember, I said I did disaster recovery as well. So if I click on exercises, it's going to bring back a table of all the exercises that I've been doing. So if it returns back an empty table, that means it failed, but it didn't. So what that means is it really did do disaster recovery as well. Yay, hooray for that. All right, one last thing I wanted to point out. Look at this URL. This is not a Microsoft URL. This is my URL because I set DNS in my pipeline as well. And this little lock is in the lock position because I also set HTTPS. So my point that I'm trying to make, again, is not that you have to use Azure. I want you to use Azure, or that you have to use GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps Services or Microsoft tooling. I want you to use that, but it's not important. What I want everyone to do is use DevOps best practices, things like infrastructure as code. And I also want them to think about what can I automate in my pipeline, because it can be way more than you think, including things like setting up DNS and doing disaster recovery. So the power of your pipeline is, well, it's really depending on your imagination. So all you people, go build some crazy awesome pipelines and start using your imagination, because with DevOps, we can solve maybe not all the world's problem, but we can solve a lot of problems, including someone going in and deleting your entire subscription. All right, thank you all so much. If you have questions, happy to answer them. If you tweet at me, I answer all my questions on Twitter as well. All right, thanks everyone.
That was awesome. So many thanks there, Abel.
Yeah.
So have we got any questions? Either put them in a chat or come off mute and ask them yourselves if you like. Give it a minute or so. I suppose to kick one off, Abel, I've got one question.
Sure.
What's the craziest thing that you've ever put into a pipeline to deploy for a customer or just having to play around?
The craziest is kind of like what you just saw right now, except instead of like a sample demo app, it really was real world, right? So we built a pipeline that did full end-to-end disaster recovery. So at any point in time, you could delete everything. And if somebody noticed it, you just press build, step back. And it did take a couple hours to run through because it was doing everything, right? Provisioning absolutely everything, configuring absolutely everything, recovering all the data, doing all of that. So we built a pipeline that really did true disaster recovery end to end. That took a while to build, right? Because again, I say this is real world, the demo that I did, but it really isn't. It's still a sample app. Real infrastructure that you have to provision and configure and think of all the cases, that got pretty hairy, but it worked.
No, that's awesome. It's such a powerful thing, isn't it? I think I just spotted another question here from Gregor. She's asking, what does that YAML look like for that pipeline that you just showed?
So yes, I showed the visual editor because the visual editor, it demos so much better and you can actually see what's going on versus a wall of YAML. So I will go ahead and post my YAML, but it's ugly. Like it's not just ugly, but it's just really, really long. And then you notice how I started with one stage and then I fanned out into all those parallel stages, and then I fan back in and I fan back out. So the YAML starts getting pretty big. If you go to my blog site at abelsquidhead.com, I should have included a link, but I totally forgot. I have a series, Real World DevOps. There we go. I have a series called Real World DevOps where I break this all down step by step by step in excruciating detail. So if you want more information, go to my blog and you can find all that.
No, that's really impressive stuff. I'm just checking down the chat now. I mean, if anybody's got any other questions, as Abel says, just I'm guessing feel free to reach out across Twitter or have a check out on Abel's blog site there. But Abel, I cannot thank you enough on behalf of the Welsh Azure user group and everybody attending tonight. Thank you so much for your time. That was an awesome demonstration. Really glad to have you with us. Cool.
Thank you all so much.
Everyone can come off mute and give Abel a round of applause for that demo.
Thank you, Abel.
And everything worked. Thanks a lot, Abel.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thanks.
We shall move on. As I said earlier on, we've got another rockstar talk for you now coming up from April Edwards. April, on that note, I think I will just hand straight over to you. Are you good to go?
Awesome. Thank you, John. I'm ready to go.
Thanks, April.
Thanks, John. Abel, thank you very much, as always. Cool. Let me get everything started and going. Share my screen. Awesome. So my name is April Edwards. I'm here in the UK alongside you guys in your time zone. I work for Microsoft. I'm in the engineering department. So I work for an area called CSE. We're commercial software engineering, and I'm a senior software engineer. So I'm out there building code and deploying with customers day to day. I have literally been working on a customer project for over 10 hours today, and I'm super excited to be with you guys tonight. So I'm going to complement exactly what Abel talked about. I mean, real world DevOps. I mean, what I'm doing day to day with customers is absolutely real world. And something I'm going to talk to you guys about tonight is managing delivery of your application using A/B deployments in Azure. And you can do this on premises. If you're running an on-premises environment, you can run it in multiple clouds. We're going to cover off two different ways to do this. We're going to do this with Azure DevOps. We're going to build this out, and then we're going to do this in GitHub Actions as well. So we're going to get started. We have a lot of demos to get through. So Abel covered off how we define DevOps, and this is a super, super crucial definition because we're delivering value. Whether you work in an operational role or a developmental role, you want to be developing, you want to be delivering that value to your end users, to your organization, to your customers. And we know why we want to do it because it drives that value. It means that pays our paychecks at the end of the day, right? So people always say, April, where do I start with DevOps? And I say, pick the thing that hurts most and do it more often. So when I get involved in a customer project, my team gets involved in some fairly high profile customer projects. Most of them are under NDA, and we're trying to solve a problem for a customer, and it is a big problem. So what may seem like a small system, or maybe not a big infrastructure project, but we're trying to transform it into Azure, into something that has caused them grief for such a long time. We're trying to enable their developers and their operational teams to deliver that value to their organization and to you guys as customers as well. So we talk about Azure DevOps, the tooling, and we talk about DevOps inside Microsoft. So both Abel and I talked, Abel spoke about it a little bit, how we use it internally. We use Azure DevOps, the tool, in all of the teams across CSC. It's how we run our project, it's how we run our planning, and we deliver our code using Azure DevOps to our customers. These numbers are going to be a little bit out of date, but we're doing over 100,000 deployments per day. We're running over 5 million work items, and we have over 100,000 engineers within Microsoft delivering to customers on Azure DevOps. Now, some of the products we're delivering on is going to be internal products like, Azure DevOps, the product, Xbox, Microsoft 365, etc. So we're using that platform to deliver to you guys as consumers. And then me in engineering, this is how we're delivering our customer projects. And Abel touched on it a bit about shifting left, about putting your security early and often. And we say this, when we talk about DevOps, fail fast, do it early, and do it often. And this is super, super critical. And we talk about this thing called shift left. And I just want to go over why we're shifting left. Because the cost to our teams, when we start doing stuff in production, it's already too late. We've already, absorbed this massive cost in our organization, and we've caused issues. Whether it's a security issue or a code issue, we need to address that early on, because we know, as developers and operational people, whether we want to use infrastructure as code or we want to develop code and deliver applications, we make a lot of mistakes when writing code. I made mistakes today writing code. I will fully admit that. But I caught that because I was using tools that helped me catch that early in my journey and getting my code to production. So it's about finding these defects early and often, and that's what we talk about shifting left, implementing security, implementing testing early on in the process. So I want to give you this idea, okay? We're going to paint this picture. How many of you have had to update an application or your environment before? Please feel free to virtually raise your hand and join me in that memory, or as I like to call it, a nightmare, right? We have this epic deployment. We probably pick a bank holiday weekend twice a year, and we patch a massive system, and we push a ton of features to this system. And it sucks. Like, we know we're going to be on call. We know things are going to go wrong. We know things are going to break, and it's risky. And the business knows it's risky, and yet they do this several times a year to us. Everyone's on call. Everyone's ready to go. We know that services are going to come offline to make these changes, and we know things are going to break. So let's change this around, because this isn't really a good deployment methodology, and we don't really want to do this, yet we've all done it. We've all been there. We've all cried through it. I have at a data center at 3 in the morning. I don't want to go through that again. So let's look at a continuous delivery model. We want to deploy more often to our environment, and we want to make smaller, more focused changes in our code. And again, when I say code, this could be, features into your application. This could be, you're writing infrastructure as code, or you're making infrastructure changes. We want to make smaller changes and incremental, and we want to test that early and often. We want to automate our testing so that when we compile our code, we get it ready to go out the door, it's been tested, and we're not just throwing it over the fence to the next person. Because when we look at a continuous delivery model, we're all working together for that same end goal. And I think what's really important about a continuous delivery model is that when we deliver that code, we can see it go through a pipeline, we can see the changes we make, we can see the testing we've done, but we have feedback, so we can do it better the next time. Because DevOps is a process that doesn't end. So when we deploy our code and we're making these small incremental changes, we can get feedback from our testing tools. We can say, right, maybe we need to fix this feature because this isn't right before it goes to production, and make iterations. Or maybe we've made an improvement, but we can take these feedback mechanisms, whether that be monitoring, et cetera, and say, we can do this better the next time, and let's improve upon it upon each iteration. And we have historical records. So going back to this massive deployment that we've done over a bank holiday weekend where everyone's in tears, we're all crying, and we all hate ourselves because we hate doing these. With more of a continuous delivery model, we have historical records of the changes we made. Why is this important? Well, one, We can trace everything that happened, what happened and why, and before it hit production. That's crucial. And unfortunately, we're all going to have outages. As Abel showed you, he deleted everything, right? And to be fair, I've pulled a host out of a cluster, I've rebooted servers, I've deleted things I shouldn't have. So having that historical record of what I've done or what you've done, what someone in the team's done, or what the team's done is crucial to be able to recover faster. So we're going to talk about deployment strategies tonight because there's different types of deployment strategies. The first one we're going to talk about is a rolling deployment, okay? So we have our server infrastructure, or we could have serverless, whatever we're running on, it could be a Kubernetes cluster or virtual machines or Azure web apps. We're going to gradually roll out our changes across our environment. So that rolling deployment might say, right, you know, our old code's going to get phased out little by little increment, okay? So maybe we roll out to like 25% of the environment, or maybe 50%, and slowly move that code out and test it and see how we go. Now, the good thing with the rolling deployment is we can pull that code back. So if we get to 50% and go, code didn't work, we can roll that back. So we have a rollback strategy, which is really good. Next up we have is a blue-green deployment. Now your blue-green deployment is a little bit more difficult because you need two identical environments. Now, for those of you sitting out here going, right, I have a production environment, it's great, but my dev test and pre-prod or UAT environments are on lesser hardware. They might be sitting in a corner collecting dust and not well maintained. So we're not testing like for like. So that's another problem we might have in our environment. But the blue-green deployment, we have two exactly identical environments. So your green environment is your production environment effectively, and you deploy all your changes to that blue environment, test your blue environment, blue becomes green, and then the old green becomes blue. So you effectively switch it over, and you can redirect if something absolutely breaks or falls apart. So the next kind of deployment I want to talk about is a canary deployment. And canary deployments, you're basically deploying a new version into production while gradually shifting your traffic into that version. We're going to use a little bit of canary deployment today with our A/B testing. An example would be like Azure web apps, where we can, you know, test a little bit of time, or maybe in Kubernetes. We have some really great features in Kubernetes and AKS in Azure that allow you to just, you know, put a new version in, test it, and redirect traffic using, you know, some kind of external load balancer. So the other thing I want to talk about, and Abel talked about them, are feature flags, right? So we have feature flags. We develop this new feature, we push our code, we push our feature flag to like ring 0, which could be us as the IT team. And when we push it to us as the IT team, we test it, and then maybe it goes out to ring 1, which is maybe a few departments and some VIPs in the area, and they test it, they like it, great. Then it goes out to ring 2, and maybe that's the entire site here in the UK that you have in one of your entire offices. And if you have an issue, you can pull back that feature flag, and there's no risk to the organization. But then you can continue rolling out that feature flag across your organization. If you're a global organization, or you know, have multiple sites in the UK, feature flags are really great for that. But we're going to talk about A/B testing because I want to be able to run different kinds of features in my website. So I want to talk about Azure DevOps, the tool. So how many of you here have used Azure DevOps? Go ahead and virtually raise your hand. Go ahead and, you know, feel free to use in the chat, type in that. That's totally cool. I like interactive sessions. So Azure DevOps is a great tool, and Abel showed you his demo on it because you can develop with any language into any platform. And people have come to me and said, well, I'm a Java developer. Azure, you know, Microsoft, they don't support Java. We absolutely do. We support Ruby, Go, you know, all sorts of different codes. But Azure DevOps, the tool, will do it in any language to any platform. So for those of you with on-premises environments, those of you deploying to AWS or GCP and maybe Azure, you can use Azure DevOps as a tool for this. And that's why it's such a strong and powerful tool. Now, Azure DevOps uses 5 things in which to achieve this. It uses Azure boards, the Azure pipelines, the repos, the test plans, and the artifacts. So we're going to go through those real quickly, and then we're going to start using them and do our A/B deployment. So Azure boards. Azure boards is great for tracking any unit of work, and it's something that's a differentiator in Azure DevOps, the tool. It's something we use in CSE day in and day out. It has Kanban style boards. We can work in Scrum style methodologies, and we're a very, very agile team. And we bring our customers into this methodology, and we use boards to track the project, track our tasks, track bugs, and everything else. It allows us to run timings. We can even run our retrospectives from it. It has some great features built into the boards. Next up, we have Azure repos. And now this is inherent in kind of your Active Directory subscription. So if you have a data residency requirement, a lot of times we use Azure repos with customers and keep their data within their into their tenant because it sits under that AD piece and hooks into Azure pretty seamlessly. Next up, we have Azure Pipelines, which is our CI/CD tooling. So our continuous integration, continuous deployment tooling. And again, we're going to go through this in a minute, but you can deploy to any environment from this tool. Then we have Azure Artifacts, which is part of Azure DevOps, and that is our artifact repository. So it supports things like NPM and Maven. And then we have Azure Test Plans, so you can run tests and run logs on it, and you can check everything through your browser and track everything. Now, pretty sure everyone's aware that we may have acquired something called GitHub. GitHub hooks in to Azure Pipelines. And so we're going to go through this in a minute, and we're going to use all these tools put together and get a really cool deployment going. So we're going to have our organization called Tailwind Traders. Okay, so whether you're a dev or you have an operational background, there's something for you to take part in this, and that's what I want to highlight. So what we're going to do, let's get on with our website. So we are Tailwind Traders, like I said. We have a website. So let me give you guys the use case here. We have a bank holiday weekend coming up, and our marketing team has come to us and said, you know, we want to see what changes to our website make that and how it affects our shipping. Does it affect our bottom line? We want to make these changes, and they come to us as the IT team and they say, when can we do it? Now, of course, if you've ever been approached about making changes to an environment, everyone wants it yesterday. No one wants it in like 6 months' time. They wanted it yesterday. So we are going to be a high-performing DevOps organization. So we are going to make changes to our website on the fly and check in our code and make it work. So the good news is it is a Thursday. We don't have a bank holiday weekend coming up just yet, but we do have a weekend coming up. So I tend to give this talk every time on a Thursday, and it fits, right? So it is Thursday. We're going to make our changes to our website. And what the marketing team wants to do is they want to change the shipping threshold. The reason why they want to change it is they want to see if the customers spend more money on a different shipping threshold than if they do on the $100 shipping threshold that's there. Now, there's a couple ways we can slice this. We can change the shipping threshold, but then we have nothing to compare against. And because we're a high-performing organization, we need metrics, we need feedback. So the marketing team is concerned about marketing numbers. The exec team is concerned about the bottom line, let's be fair, but we want to give them an effective way to test this. So let's make changes to our code. So the good news is that, I can open up our code. Now, my code is sitting in GitHub in a repo, but I'm editing it from VS Code because if I add in, something or too many spaces, it will pick it up for me, which I really like. So yeah, I'm going to make the shipping changes now. So we want to change this threshold to $250 for the upcoming bank holiday weekend, but we also want to keep that $100 threshold. So let's make changes to our code. Let's check it in. Okay, so I've made changes to my code, and this is connected to my GitHub account. I'm going to make some changes, and I'm going to change the shipping threshold. Okay, and I'm going to check in this code, and I'm going to push it up to my repo. And actually, I can open up our repo here. I can give this a little click, give it a little refresh. Change shipping charges, we should have changes to our master branch. There we go, 18 seconds ago. So we can see that I made changes. It checked in our code into our repo. Our team can see the code, they can see that commit. Now, I talked about GitHub integrating into Azure pipelines. So what I want to do is go to the marketplace here and set up our GitHub repo to talk to Azure pipelines because we want to deploy this from Azure DevOps. So if I hit search here for Azure Pipelines, I can click on it here. I've already configured access ahead of time. This is all authenticating on the back end through Active Directory. So I'm taking my GitHub account, it's hooking into Azure DevOps, and it's saying, okay, cool, we can use your Active Directory account. So from the options down here, I can select all my repositories to have access to ADO. That's a little excessive. So I actually just want to go into this current project, this current repo, and just check that into ADO and connect that up. So as you can see, I have access to way too many repos, but that's a whole other story for a different day. We can search for it. There we go. Click on it, save our changes. and it's going to automatically redirect me to Azure DevOps. So it's going to open up Azure DevOps for me. It's going to authenticate through my Microsoft account, again, all through my Active Directory account. So when I do this, I have the option here to select an organization in my Azure DevOps piece. Now, I have already created an organization which we can use. I already have a project we can use. I could also create a brand new project. I could go net new completely, but we already have an existing project. So our project team is, tracking everything through the boards and all this other good stuff. So I want to check the repository in which we're pulling our code from. So I'm going to go into this GitHub repo that I'm using. And what it's doing is reading my GitHub repo and it's analyzing my code. So for those of you that have worked in GitHub quite a bit, whether you're writing anything from PowerShell to Go to Java, GitHub has a bit of a read of your repo and divides out what type of code. So it's looking at our code going, you have some Docker containers. We can deploy it to to Kubernetes if you want, because you have everything containerized. We can go to .NET. We can go to Node.js. It's seeing what we have installed. But what I want to do, I actually want to start from scratch. So let's start a pipeline. So it's taken our code. It's given us a little bit of a starter pipeline, but I have a really, really slick team. And what they've done is they've actually given me code in which to use. Now, they've given me a YAML build pipeline, which is great. Now, in this pipeline, they can do all sorts of things like, add in testing. We talked about this testing thing. So that's what we want to do, is we want to put our testing into this pipeline. So I'm going to do that here. So I am running some tests here, and we'll go through what this does in a minute. We're going to save it, and we're going to run it. So I'm setting up my continuous integration with my Azure pipelines. I can create a new branch for this commit, but I want to go straight to my master because I like living life on the edge. So we're creating our pipeline, and what it's going to do, it's going to give us this build capability. It's going to run our code for us. So this is going to kick off. This will probably take 6 or 7 minutes. It is going to run some tests. It's going to run against our code, but I want this to release. So before we release everything, we're going to build that together in Azure DevOps. So I'm going to go to our releases here. I do have some backup pipelines in case everything breaks, because sometimes the demo gods are not very nice to us. So I'm going to build this on the fly. Now, when I go to build a new release pipeline, I have great options here of what kind of template I want to use. So again, I talked about using things like, Node.js. Maybe I'm deploying to an on-premises environment, and I want to use an IIS website and SQL database deployment. And I have physical boxes or virtual machines I'm deploying to. I can use this option here. Now, our website is sitting on an Azure app service. So I'm going to hit apply and pull that into this stage. Now, I am a very smart cookie, and we are in our RIT organization. We have multiple environments to run from, and I will walk you through those in just a minute. But the first environment we're going to deploy to is staging. So we have a staging environment here. Boom, right here. It's our staging environment. So I'm going to set this up for our staging environment. I need to authenticate through my Azure subscription, which, barring no outages, we should be good to go. Now, when I talk about the type of app I'm deploying, I said this is an Azure web app, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I have the option here to deploy this on Linux or for containers, or maybe I'm deploying a function app, or maybe a mobile app. But this is going to be a web app for Windows. And then my app service name. It has already authenticated to my subscription. It's looking for the web apps I have deployed, and it goes, oh, these are the ones we can see. Great. I want it to deploy to my production environment. And when I click on this deploy app service, it's going to inherit those settings I just pulled in. So it will already know my subscription to pull from, what kind of app service, and yeah, my production environment. But wait a minute, we're not deploying to production. Hold on. We want to deploy to staging. Too many options, right? So we're going to deploy to staging, go back in here, and it pulls up that staging change. Awesome. Now, we talk about YAML. I will get more into YAML in a minute, but I can see exactly what we just built. Of course, they've moved it. But I can save this here, and I can export out the YAML. So you can build it in the classic editor and then view the YAML bit. So I've created our staging environment. And if I go into our Azure portal, you can see I have a staging environment here that is an Azure web app. So while I also have a staging environment, I also have a production environment. So when I run this staging pipeline, I just don't want it to go into the next area. I want to add in a manual intervention. So I go to my pipeline here. Our code's going to run into our staging environment. It's going to deploy to that web app, and we'll test it in a second. But before it goes anywhere else, I want to add a manual check. Okay. The manual checks have some great abilities in your pipelines, and maybe it's just to have some eyes on something, or maybe you want a post-deployment approval. So I'm going to enable a post-deployment approval. Now I'm going to add myself. Usually you don't want to add yourself. You want to add maybe a group, and you want to maybe, tick this box. The user requesting a release or deployment should not approve it, because it's not always good to review your own code. Another set of eyes is always good. So I'm going to enable that. The other thing I can do is I can put on a gate. I can add a delay on my gate, and I have different types of gates to add. And this is important because I am deploying this to my staging environment, but I want to make sure that whatever I deploy to my staging environment is the right thing. So a lot of you deploying into Azure today are using things like Azure policy. So you've set up policies that your organizations have to abide by, a little bit of boundaries to what needs to happen, or maybe you have compliance requirements for ISO, HIPAA, all sorts of good stuff, or SOX. So you can check against your Azure compliance policy here. You can invoke a function, invoke a REST API. And again, we talk about getting feedback and having this full life cycle of our applications. We can query Azure Monitor. So maybe we add this gate in there that queries Azure Monitor to really see how our application's performing. Okay, and maybe we want to query what work items to see, what work items are open, or does this address how many bugs or whatever's going on. The other thing we can do is we can auto redeploy. So let's say we fail. I don't know, our code stinks. This will redeploy to the last successful deployment so our code doesn't change, which is another great feature built in. So we're going to add this post-deployment approval. That's good to go. Job done. Now, I said to you we had multiple environments that are identical. We have the staging environment here, Tailwind Trader Staging, and it's the website here. I promise, $100, right? Now, we also have our production environment. Azure Web Apps have a really, really great feature built into them called deployment slots. The thing I like about deployment slots is you can really just build an identical environment up to what you're running in that primary environment and use it to test against. And you don't have to deploy more infrastructure, more virtual machines or another Kubernetes cluster or more pods, whatever. So we can add a slot. So I'm going to call this Welsh Azure User Group. Okay. Now I have the option here. Do I not clone my settings, or do I want to clone some settings? So this is my production environment. Actually, yeah, you know what? I want an identical slot to what I'm deploying in production, because I want like for like. Because if I'm not deploying like for like, I'm not going to get good feedback on what we're doing. So this will deploy. This will add our slot. This will do this on the fly. I'm just going to let it run. Takes just a moment. This is where we need the really good hold elevator music. There we go. Great. So we can see we have 3 slots here. We have production, we have a Canary environment, and we have the new Wales Azure User Group slot. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to route our traffic 50% between our production environment and 50% to our new Wales User Group slot. Okay. So why am I doing that? Because there's a load balancer on the front end of this web app. I want to leverage the deployment slot because it doesn't cost me any extra to do a deployment slot, and I can test like for like code. All right, and we can load balance our website. So I'm going to save our changes here. It's going to update the settings for our web app. Great. So let's get back into our pipeline. So we have this staging environment. I want to add another stage. Okay. Again, we're going to go straight into our app service environment. Now this is going to be our Canary environment. Now I did show you we have a Canary slot already pre-built, but I'm going to call it Welsh Azure User Group, because why not, right? And we're going to configure this just like the other task. So I do need to hook up my subscription. I need to get the app service name in there. But now the difference this time is I'm deploying to our production environment. But hold on, we don't want this to just go from staging to production. That would be dangerous and kind of dumb. We have a tick box here, deploy to slot or app service environment. So the good news is I can see my resource group here, and I can see the slots. So as I select this here, we can see that I have my Canary slot. It's called Canary, and we have the Welsh Azure User Group slot. So I'm going to deploy to that as well. I'm going to save those changes, go back into my pipeline, and go there. Now I've gone to staging. I have a Canary environment. I want to add a new stage, and I'm going to do another app service environment because we do have that production environment, right? So we're going to save that here, call it production, and fill this out just like we did. Now we can clone our Canary environment settings. our Welsh Azure user group canary settings, without question. But there's a little bit of an issue every time I do that in getting my settings correct. So I'm just going to manually configure this just to make sure it does it properly. And right, we are in our production slot and we're good to go. So I can look at my pipeline here. I'm happy with it. We're going into the 3 environments. These 3 environments we're deploying to, these 3 stages, are going to match those 3 Azure web apps. Now, the one thing I want to do is before we go into production, I want to put in a pre-deployment approval. So we have a post-deployment condition. We have a pre-deployment. So we have the ability here to do a manual approval, a manual trigger, excuse me. We can do it after a release. Now, I want to do it after the canary stage. We can change the trigger for that. We can add artifacts. We can add schedules to that. And again, I want to add myself as an approver, which again, not best practice, but you know, I could pick on one of you all in the crowd and, you know, yeah. And again, we can skip approval if the same approver approved the previous stage. Why would we do that? Well, I approved it coming out of, you know, staging environment. It all works. I'm just going to push it into the next stage, right? Because I'm trying to rush this out because we want to get this done before the weekend, but we don't want to do that. So maybe we do skip that approval if that's required. Cool. So that's good. That's built. We have a full release pipeline. So let's check on our build that we started a little bit ago. So our build was successful. So we pushed our code. We have full traceability of the code we pushed. We've pushed some work items. We can add some more tests in there, but we can look at what it actually did. So if I open up the build job here, I can see that, you know, we checked out our code. I had to run a NuGet command, compile our code, use some Node. There's some Node.js code in here for this website. We ran our build, and then we ran our tests. And once it completes all these tests, we package that up, and we're ready to go into our release pipeline. So if you remember Abel's talk, he was talking about how many unit tests we run at Microsoft. When we're deploying any of our products, over 27,000 unit tests have to run when you check in our code. The current project I'm working on right now is a really small serverless infrastructure for a customer. I say small, big impact, but not a massive environment. And we're running about 35 tests, 35 unit tests every time I check in my code to my environment for my current customer project. So we absolutely use that in best practice in engineering. So to the products you guys are using and the stuff we're delivering as CSE, as the engineering team. So I go into this release pipeline. We've built out these 3 stages, which is really exciting. What I do need to add is that release, that build that we just had, I need to put it in there. So I have some old stuff in here just in case everything breaks, but this is the one we just built. If you don't believe me, I'll show it to you again. But we can pull from Azure repos, or maybe we have a build artifact we want to pull from GitHub. We can also pull from Azure artifacts or Jenkins. So we can easily integrate Jenkins into our build pipelines if we so desire. The other thing I'm going to do here is tick this continuous deployment trigger. So we've manually built this out, more so everyone on this end can see how it's done. But in the future, I want to do it every single time I push to my master or my main branch. So I'm going to save my code. We're good to go. And actually, I'm going to create a release. So I can choose the source. I can choose the artifacts. I'm going to take the latest build. And this release is going to run. So it's going to queue in the pipeline. And it's going to run. So what effectively should happen in our staging environment in a minute, we should see the staging website completely change. We should see this $250 threshold. We'll run all of our tests and everything will be good to go. So while this is baking, I want to show you guys GitHub Actions. Okay. Now GitHub Actions, super hot topic. So while that's running, it's actually a good time to get a cup of tea. If you're like me, you have your mulled wine ready to go, and I have my mince pies ready to go. So this is usually the time when I'd start eating and drinking, but since we have more to show you, we're gonna keep cracking on. So I have my code in GitHub, okay? And we see that I have this exact same shipping code here that I can make changes to. I can make changes to my code and I can trigger an action without a problem. So I actually have a little bit of a different environment because I'm deploying to the current environment. Now this is identical to the one I've just deployed to, so it is very similar. There's a really great feature called the Deployment Center. So to get started with GitHub Actions, there's a couple different ways to get started. Now GitHub Actions are going to be entirely in YAML, and they're super easy to get started with. So let's go to the Deployment Center here, and we can choose our source control. So where ADO, Azure DevOps, allows us to pick our source code repo. So we could have a local Git, we could have GitHub, we could have Azure repos, we could have our code sitting in Azure DevOps and set up this deployment center from that location. The other thing that's kind of cool is you can actually pull now from OneDrive. I'm not sure how I feel about that one yet, but it's pretty cool. If maybe you're pulling from an FTP server and you're trying to pull code into your website, this is a great way to get started, right? So I've already authenticated into my GitHub account. I'm going to continue on. And this is really cool. We have app service build server. We have Azure pipelines built in, but I want to build this as a GitHub action. So cool. Let's get started. Organization. This sees my GitHub accounts that I have access to. I'm going to put them in there. The ones that allow this as well. I have a couple other repos that don't have this configured or they're not at the enterprise level. And there's a few other limitations in it. So we're just going to not worry about that one. But these are the ones that have access. So I need to pick a repository. Let's see if I can. Tailwind Traders website. And I can choose my branch. So I have 2 branches in here just for the purpose of this demo, but traditionally I'm working off the main branch. I'm checking my code into that. So I wouldn't necessarily push my whole CI/CD out from a branch, but I do it from my main branch. I wouldn't do it from another branching strategy. So I have an option here where I can add or overwrite a workflow definition or use a new one. I want to add one. Okay, we're going to do this from net new. So this is really great. We can pick a runtime stack. So again, if you're running Python or Node or Java, absolutely. Now this app is running .NET Core in the back. I need version 3.1. So we're going to get started. So what this does is it's going to output the YAML I need for an action. I don't have to do anything to get started with GitHub Actions. I don't have to write any code. I don't have to mess around with YAML because every time I mess around with YAML, I forget a space. Like every time I touch YAML, I miss a space. Like it's grim. So I hit finish, and it's literally going to set up the deployment and a deployment pipeline from GitHub Actions. Cool. So I can click on here. I can see the status of it, and it's going to bring us straight to our app service deployment. So this is going to fail, and I'll get into that later. But let's check in on our website and see how we're doing. So we see how our release is going. Cool. We've gotten through staging. I click on the staging environment. I can look at the logs and go, right, we have deployed our app service. We've built our code, our artifacts ready to go, and it's deployed into our app service. So before I give this an approval, I need to make sure this actually works. So I'm going to click on the link here. I can click on this one too. We'll pull up the same website. 6 one way, half a dozen the other. $250. And to prove to you, I just clicked on the link. $250 from our staging environment. All right, so we're good to go there. So I'm happy with that. We've passed all these performance tests. I'm going to prove this change. Now we're going to push this from the staging environment into our Canary environment. So we know our changes are successful. We're good to go. We're going to push into Canary, and let's check on our GitHub action. So we're bouncing back and forth a little bit. So we're doing effectively the exact same thing. Now, Azure DevOps in the classic editor is a lot more visually pleasing. It's easier to see for everyone in an audience, and that's why I like using it. I can write things in YAML, and you can go and definitely pull in the code and pull in the snippets to build your YAML code out. Because while it's great that I built out my action, because it was easy, it's going to fail. And I know it's going to fail because I know my code needs more than this. It's going to fail on .NET. Yep. I need to point it to my working file, my working directory. So before this talk, I was like, I'll get this going for everyone. So I've actually built out another action. And this is doing all sorts of cool stuff. You can see that it's doing a build check on my PRs. It's running the website in AKS. And it looks like it's going to run our app service deployment for us. So this is actually the one that I built that is sort of working. It does work, and I'll show you how it doesn't work in a minute. But I had to basically just change my YAML file a little bit and add some source code. So if I go to view my workflow file, we can see this is in YAML. It's very similar to what we built out, but I had to change my working directory because GitHub Actions and the Azure portal doesn't know where my working directory is, but I can just add that YAML in and we're good to go. So this build is still going, and it's going to take probably 6 or 7 minutes. So let's go check in on our website. So our Canary environment is still deploying. We can click on this here. We can watch it. Again, another great time to go get some mulled wine or have a sip of coffee or throw in some elevator music. But yeah, still running. So how long did this one take? Our staging environment ran for 2 minutes and 18 seconds. So if we were to make changes to our code again, it would run that build pipeline in a few minutes. It would run tests against our code. It would output a build artifact, and it would automatically release into another release pipeline. But we're doing this manually so we can see it, and we should have, I hope, a working Canary environment. Almost. All right, so the last one took 2 minutes and 18 seconds. This one is taking 2 minutes and 13 seconds. It looks like it's about to go. It's completing the fourth task. Again, we don't have any work items tied to this now, but I talked to you about Azure boards and tying those work items. We can see all these commits. So we can say you can see all the commits I've done in this demo for X amount of time. So any change that's done to our code, we can see. Why is this important? Because we talked about traceability within our organization. It's like, someone goes and changes an IP address or something really simple, really easy, turns into a massive blow up. This is how we can prevent it because we have that commit history. Cool. So we've deployed into our Canary environment. Let's go check out our Canary environment. So in the Azure web app, in our production environment, if I click on this new Welsh Azure user group, and I click on this link, what we should have is a $250 threshold shipping charge. It does take a moment to light up. There we go. We have $250. So let's really test this because we have the $250 shipping. We have this $100 shipping. So our marketing team wanted to see what the results would be if we ran both websites. So what we're effectively doing is running both websites. Where'd it go? There it is, our release pipeline. We're running two versions of our website, the A and the B deployment. So I have a little bit of audience participation for everyone. Let me just pull it up. Get through some slides. Nobody wants to see slides. Right. Take a minute, go to the site, scan the QR code, and I want a little bit of audience participation. I'm happy for everyone to come off mute if you're comfortable to do that. And I want you to tell me which version of the website you have. We should have about a 50-50 split. You're also welcome to type into the chat and see what we get.
I've got 100.
Someone's going to keep tally.
Yeah, I've got 100 as well.
So in theory, the Azure web app has a load balancer that will round robin our requests. So I put a custom DNS name on the front of our website. And again, it could be companyx.com. It should round robin them. So we should get 150 and 250 in pretty equal parts. All right, so looking at the chat, there's a good amount of 250 and a good amount of 100. Now, we're not exactly 50%. We don't guarantee 50%, but I'm sure if we were to really tie this up, I think it'd be really close. So the good news is we are absolutely getting people hitting the $250 threshold and the $100 threshold. So as an IT department, as an IT team, we have successfully been able to deploy our code to an A/B deployment. So as promised, so you guys can keep rolling in your tallies, all right, and see how we go. I want to see how our GitHub action's doing. So I do have some dependencies that are failing. I do have some actual bugs in my code, which stinks because in real life, I like to have these working for you, but I have an actual bug that's been logged in my application. So that was where I spent my last hour and a bit before coming on tonight. So yeah, so we did get our actions set up pretty well. But we do have some bugs in our code. So unfortunately, I can't show the change in the shipping as such to be successful, as in it's not going to deploy it to the website through the action. But if I go to the YAML, I'll just walk you through what we did, basically. So again, when I make any change, any push to the branch on my main branch, it's going to start building our code. We're going to check out main. We're going to set up some .NET Core. We do have some dependencies. We have an NPM dependency install, and we are having some issues with that. So there is a bug in that I found tonight, unfortunately, before coming on to speak to everyone tonight. But then we're building our code with .NET, and all we added is the working directory. That's the one thing I had to build in my YAML file that wasn't there from the ADO side. So if I go to what ADO has given us here, I can open up that file and show you. It's pretty much similar. except it just doesn't have the working directory, okay? So with the code and the app I'm running specifically, that's what we need to do. So I'm a little bit disappointed. I couldn't show you the changes in our web app using GitHub Actions just because there's a bug with something else outside of our control, really. But effectively, we've been able to take our code, run some A/B deployment testing on it, deploy it out through an Azure DevOps pipeline, get a pretty solid 50-50 split amongst everyone in the audience. And then we can use GitHub Actions as well. So we can do it one of two ways, whatever kind of your preference is for your organization, but it's super, super easy to set up. So if you don't like YAML and don't want to take that step with Azure DevOps, you can still do things in the classic editor, and you want to start embracing DevOps, you can pull out that YAML code and start learning. And I would highly recommend to do that. So that is everything from me today on A/B deployments in Azure, and I'm happy to open up to questions for everyone now.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, April. I think we do have a few questions earlier on in the chat, if you bear with. We've got a question from Edmar. He asks, do you prefer to segregate the app services with slots or resource groups? So if we have slots, I need a load balance on front of this. Isn't that right?
Okay, so I'll start with the first question. So when we segregate app services, I tend to use deployment slots when we need to do testing or a division. So I'll use it for different environments. So production, UAT, test dev. Within that resource group, within that environment, and then you can use maybe, let's say there's a database on the back end, right? Because most applications have databases. You can absolutely change that connection string to a database. You can use it in another resource group. I tend to use the slots instead of the app service because it's cost effective. So in the service plan I'm running for my app services, I'm allowed 5 deployment slots. You can go higher tier to allow 10 deployment slots, depending on the needs of your environment. So it really depends on the customer use case. But again, it just depends on your use case. But if you have slots, the load balancer is built into the app service plan and into the web app itself. So that's inherent. You don't have to configure it. So if you do want to use something like another app service in a resource group and divide that out, you have to think about a WAF or what have you. So, 6 one way, happens the other. It depends on the requirements. You may have a WAF requirement depending on your application and the code there as well. So in short, it depends, but I tend to lean towards slots when we're looking to run different environments and have like-for-like code. But if a customer is willing to have different web apps to run different environments, we will absolutely do that depending on the customer requirement. But yeah, I mean, we use slots all the time. They're free, and why not? And literally, there's a click of a button, spin one up, and get cracking.
Awesome. Thanks, April. I think we've got another question from Luke. Luke, I don't know if you want to come off mute and ask it, but you're asking something about Azure policy compliance. Is it in real time? Because normally Azure policy compliance takes about 24 hours to update. Is that right?
Azure policy is in real time. It depends, how you're deploying it and how big your environment is. So I can make a policy update and have it go into effect pretty immediately. I have deployed Azure policy with things like Terraform and ARM templates both. But yeah, the changes are pretty immediate. Now, again, it depends how they're deploying the policy and what other things they have in place. So if you have it in a pipeline and you have other things, if you have a large environment as well, it depends how you're tearing that out. So it's pretty much real time on Azure policy. Case in point, I have the same customer I've worked with that I've kind of referenced a few times tonight. They have compliance requirements. They had more compliance requirements turned on than they needed. And we were wondering why our compliance reports were throwing up all these security issues, and we're like, well, hold on, we don't need that. And we realized so we turned it off, and it tiered through pretty quickly on the reporting side, especially as well. So.
No, thanks so much, April. That's brilliant. I'm not sure that there's any more questions. If there's any more, get them into the chat now. Otherwise, I think we're good. April, everybody off mute, I think, join me in a round of applause. Super session, super helpful. Thank you very much, April Edwards. Thanks
Thank
for
you for having
the
me.
support.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. Okay, thanks, April. On that note, we've come to the quiz time. But before we kick on with the quiz, I got a request. Can we all get our cameras on and get our festive jumpers out for a photo opportunity, please? And get us all in gallery view. So come on. If you don't want to, that's fine also. Let me know when. Everybody's running around now because they've been drinking mulled wine all evening, no doubt, just staggering across the cat. There we go. Keep them coming. There you are, Jack. Get that hat on. Matt has just pulled some tinsel off his Christmas tree. Right, come on, any more for any more? That's it. Keep them coming. Oh, that's great. How do I go to a large gallery? I want a large gallery. Oh, there we are. That's good. I'm on large. Can everybody see that gallery, or is it just me?
I
Any
can
more?
see it, but I'm on
Yeah,
preview
cool.
mode, so I don't count.
Right. There we are. Everyone smile. Say cheese. That's awesome. Thanks all. Oh, hang on. George is in. I'll get on with George. He's the man in the mirror. he's disappeared. There he is. I got it. I got you, George. Nice one. Thanks. All right, then. Don't go anywhere. Let's get the screen shared. Oh, come on, Darren. You got in there quick then. Oh, he's gone. Doesn't matter. Right. Thanks all. Let me share my screen. We're going to kick straight on with the Kahoot quiz. So bear with me whilst I just get that up for you. And whilst I'm doing that, just remember, everyone, to tweet at Welsh Azure and hashtag WAUG for a chance to win a £50 Amazon voucher. And I'm now going to share. Right, I'm going to turn this sound off, so bear with me. Right, okay, everybody should be able to see my screen there. Let me know if you can't, or message in the chat, and I can see the code is at the top here. So everybody get joining. How many people have we got? I think we've got about 40 odd people still left in, so we should have a good show. We've got a bit of a mix of questions for you tonight, 20 questions. First prize is going to be a £50 Amazon voucher, so it's all to play for. Is anybody struggling at all, then just drop a message in the chat, but we'll give it a minute or so for everybody to join in so we don't have anybody missing out here. And like we say earlier, don't forget to check out the Cloud Skills Challenge. There are some absolutely fantastic prizes on offer for and some superb learning material as well with MS Learn. So check out our Twitter. We'll be sharing some more links to that, or scroll back up in the chat window here. We put some links in earlier. The recording of this session will go up on the site, hopefully, where we'll see probably tomorrow now. Like I say, I'll run through with the guys on the Twitter competition as well. So we'll announce who the winner is with the best selfie. So don't forget to tweet and tag us. How are we doing? We got 20 messages. And also, don't forget to check out the awesome content of the festive tech calendar. Like I say, the global community event that we mentioned earlier on. Check out that. Get involved. Watch the content. There's some awesome speakers on there. Any more for any more? 22. Okay. Is anybody waiting? Anybody stuck? Drop me a message in the chat. Otherwise, we shall make a start. Oh. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds because somebody just dropped in then. Yeah, I think we're good. Right. Here we go then, guys. 20 questions. Let's begin. Okay, which is the odd one out? Is it Azure Artifacts, Azure Test Scripts, Azure Repos, or Azure Boards? I'm going to put my snow back on. And my lights. Oof, there we go. 16, you got that one right. Ross, you're the leader. Quick fingers. Question 2. Boards in Azure DevOps are used to plan, track, and discuss work across your teams, continuously build, test, and deploy to any cloud platform, get unlimited cloud-hosted private Git repos for your project, or support on-premise and cloud-hosted builds. That was a lot of words for what was clearly an easy answer then. 22 of you got that right. Great. Let's see how that changes things. Oh, Ross is still holding strong there at the top. When did Azure reach general availability? January 2009, March 2011, February 2010, or April 2012? And it was February 2010. Oh, not many of you got that one right. Okay, let's move on. Oh, we've shuffled up the leaderboard. Doe has taken the lead. What is GitHub? Is it a hosted virtual environment for your infrastructure? Is it a software development planning utility? Is it a secure storage platform designed specifically for developers? Or is it a distributed version control and code management platform? We've got all answers in. And it was green. Too easy. Who wrote these questions? Okay, no change at the top there for a minute. Right, what is the best way to report a bug to a GitHub project? Is it to send an email to the project owner? Is it don't bother reporting software bugs? Search for the bug in the project's existing issues and add one if needed, or fork the repo and tag the code creator in your repo? Yes. Search for the bug in the project's existing issues and add one if you need to. How's that? Oh, we've got MD. He's on fire with 5 correct answers in the row, has taken the lead. True or false? DevOps has its roots in Japanese manufacturing techniques. The answer is either true or it might be false. Everybody's rushed to the answer quite quickly there. A little bit of a clue in the picture for you there. Yes, true. I think it was Honda introduced one of the first lean manufacturing initiatives. No change at the top. Let's keep going. MD is there. Right, which is your icon is this? Virtual machine, front door, SQL Cloud, or app service? Remember, guys, it's the speed of your answer as well gives you more points. The quicker you are, the more points you get. Yes, another easy one. No change at the top for MD. Still leading the charge. Okay, which Azure icon is this one? IoT Hub? Is it Azure Files? Is it Databricks? Or is it DevOps Boards? Yes, 20. 20 of you got that one right. Still no change. I should have really made these answers harder, shouldn't I? Let's kick on, see where we're going next. Right, before working at Microsoft, what did April Edwards do for work? Was she in a surgical residency? Was she a skiing instructor? Did she work as a plumber? Or did she do some carpet cleaning? Everybody knows you, April. 15, you got that one right. Cool. Let's move on. How's that affected the leaderboard? Oh, Doe is back up ahead with 9 in a row. Correct. Well done, Doe. Ross is a close second. Right, what inspirational struggle has Abel Wang overcome in his past? So, was he forced to play drums when he really wanted to be a guitarist? Did he get rejected for a job at Apple? Was he homeless and living in his car? Or did he lose his prize Ibanez gem guitar in a game of poker with his friends? Yes, Abel's quite open about his past, and it's quite an inspirational story he's given there. So Well done, 9 of you. You got that correct. And Ross has nipped into the lead there over Doe and MD. I feel like a horse racing presenter. Right, which of these is a benefit of A/B testing? Does it enable security on your Git repo? Does it enable resources to be split across multiple subscriptions? Is it faster to find bugs? Or does it allow a subset of users to test new features? What do we think? Yeah, it allows a subset of users to test out new features, as April has just shown us. And there's no change at the top. Rosto and MD. Question 12. What is GitHub Codespaces? Is it a free storage for applications? Is it a special GitHub repo? Is it a cloud-powered development platform in a container? Or is it none of those things? Yes, 13 of you got that one right. Well done all. Have we got any change? Oh, second place, MD has pipped up with a streak of 3. Ross still leading. Okay, what unified data governance product has Microsoft recently announced is in preview? Is it Azure View? Is it Azure Govern View? Is it Azure Pure View? Or Azure Data View? That was a tongue twister. Oh, only 8 of you got that right. Yes, Azure Pure View to be able to, I think, put some governance across your on-prem and cloud-hosted SQL and data environments. No change at the top. Ross is just pipped it to the post. How many days till Christmas, everyone? I'm not even going to read those answers out. If you don't know, what's going on? 13, 14, 15, and 16. I even read them out because I had 5 seconds to go. Yes. People are, I admit, probably in different time zones, but sorry, guys. Anyway. Okay. Oh, and we got a change in the lead. I'm sure Ross is going to give me a row for that one. Anyway, let's move on. Doe, you're in the lead. What did Rudolph have, everyone? Was it a tremendous ego? I'm not even going to pronounce that second one. Did he have a bad attitude, or was it a very shiny nose? What do we think? Of course, he had a very shiny nose. No change at the top. Doe is still hanging in there. Question 16. Right, have you done your Welsh Azure user group selfie and tweeted it at Welsh Azure for a chance to win a prize? The answer is obvious. You can't just click oh yes and not do it. You have to do it. I can't believe I just gave the answer away. How ridiculous was that? And it's really bizarre talking to yourself whilst reading quiz questions out, by the way. Oh, you can see the only right answer was oh yes. Come on, guys, get with it. And there's a change in the leaderboard. Right, true or false? You've had a great time tonight with our awesome speakers. Oh, there we go. Of course we have. Thank you, Abel and April. Superb to have our user group. No change in the leaderboard though, eh? We've got 3 questions to go. Question 18. How many 1-inch gumballs fit into a quart mason jar? That went through you, didn't it? There's no point counting them because, well, you can't see half of them. Oh, Ross, you hit the wrong button. Sorry, mate. Oh, 5 of you got it right. It was, and that's like a fact off some website. So, you know, I'm not going to tell you which website because I can't remember. Right. Oh, Rossi's coming back. Here we go. Doe, you're still in the lead. We've got 2 questions to go. When was the computer mouse invented? 1891, 1919, 1964, or 1975? And there's a picture of it. Oh, only 5 of you got the right answer. Oh, well, let's see what that's done to the leaderboard. Doe is streaking ahead with a win streak of 9 in a row. Right, last question. And I got a feeling, Ross, you're going to have to do... Will we see you at the next Azure user group on the 21st of Jan, 2021? The answer should be obvious. Oh, who was that one? You got to put your name in that window. No, 20 of you got that right. Let's see who the winner is then, everyone. The podium in 3rd place with 16 out of 20 is MD. And in 2nd place, we've got Ross. Oh, Ross, but in 1st place with 19 out of 20 correct. We've got Doe. Doe, well done. You've won yourself a £50 Amazon voucher. And we got Matt B and the Pew as runners up there in 4th and 5th place. Right, guys, if you can, Doe, make yourself known in the chat. Oh, is that Doe, Greg, or is that you? Wow. Is that you? Nice one, Gregor. Right then, before you all shoot off, let me quickly share the last slide of the evening. And of course, the white screen. Guys, you've been fantastic. Big shout out, really, first and foremost to Abel and April for such a fantastic evening of talks. They've been inspiring, brilliant, wonderful, everything that you can think of. Huge thanks to our sponsors, Servant and Admiral, and of course Microsoft. We couldn't put these groups together with the fantastic prizes that we've announced tonight and get these awesome speakers to come and give everybody the knowledge that we all so love. Finally, thanks to all of you guys. Thanks for attending so much. We hope you've had a really good fun learning experience this evening. Please do help us grow our little community over in Wales. Help us share our tweets, our LinkedIn pages. Just help us get the word out there. Don't forget, you've got till tomorrow to tag yourself in a festive selfie at Welsh Azure and hashtag WAUG. Save that date. Next meetup is on the 21st of January, which is the Thursday. Finally, last ask, could you scan that QR code? Give us some feedback. If you want to speak, if you've got some valid feedback, fill it all in on that form. But until next time, guys, it's been a pleasure. Really do sincerely hope you've enjoyed yourself. And we shall announce the winner of the selfie competition tomorrow. And Gregor, your £50 voucher will be with you over the next few days. Thanks, everybody, for attending.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, John. Bye.
Everybody.